Have you ever found yourself desperately trying to get rid of a problem, a pain, a thought that won't leave you alone? Have you tried to silence your mind, suppress an emotion, push someone away, or break a cycle, only to find that, no matter how hard you try, it all comes back even stronger? It feels like some cosmic irony. The more you want it to disappear, the more it repeats. Louder, heavier, more present. The truth is, there's a deeper reason behind this, and it's not outside of you. It's not bad luck. It's not punishment. It's energy. It's observation. It's vibration. In this video, you're going to discover why certain patterns persist even when you've tried everything to change them. You'll understand how the simple act of resisting, even with the best intentions, might actually be fueling the very thing you want to avoid. Because the universe doesn't respond to your desire to push something away, it responds to your constant emotional attention. Today, you'll unlock a powerful key. The way you observe the world is what shapes your reality. And maybe, just maybe, you don't need to fight anymore. You just need to change the way you're looking. The cycle of resistance and repetition. Everything you resist, you feed. And that's not just a nice spiritual metaphor, it's a real vibrational law. There's a hidden cycle that traps many people in patterns of pain, scarcity, conflict, and suffering. The cycle of resistance and repetition. A silent but powerful energetic movement that happens every time you reject something with emotional intensity. Think about it. When you resist an experience, what are you really doing? You're focusing on it, giving it attention, connecting to it, even if it's through anger, fear, or indignation. And that attention isn't neutral. It's charged with emotion, it vibrates, and anything that vibrates communicates with the field. Everything you observe with emotional intensity becomes a signal sent to the universe, and the universe responds. That's why so often the attempt to solve something ends up keeping it alive. You don't realize it, but you're staring at the problem all the time. Even when you say you want to break free, you're still keeping the energy of the problem active within you through resistance. The fight against something is, energetically, a form of connection to it. Imagine your mind and vibrational field like a camera lens. Whatever that lens focuses on comes into sharpness, into form, into life. And when you point that lens at what you don't want, even with the intention of eliminating it, you're actually sharpening its clarity in your reality. It's like trying to put out a fire by blowing on it. You think you're helping, but you're feeding it, because fire needs oxygen to grow, just like problems need your emotional attention to persist. And resistance is a constant gust of air, a refusal so charged with energy that it ends up acting as fuel. The greatest trap is that this cycle feels logical. You feel something bad, you want to get rid of it. That's natural. But in trying to push it away, you get stuck because you observe too much, feel too much, think too much. And without realizing it, you begin to live around what you don't want. Your decisions are based on what you want to avoid. Your actions, thoughts, and emotions all revolve around what should have disappeared. And the universe, sensitive to vibration, not rational language, simply responds to the signal you're sending. It doesn't distinguish between I want this and I don't want this. It understands frequency. And the frequency of resistance is one of the strongest there is. It carries fear, anger, tension, insecurity. In other words, all the emotional charge needed to keep alive exactly the reality you want to change. That's why the cycle of resistance becomes a cycle of repetition. Because by resisting, you observe. By observing, you focus. And by focusing, you activate. The more you try to eliminate, the more you reinforce. The more you try to avoid, the more you manifest. And only when you understand this mechanism can you begin to break it. It's not about ignoring the problem. It's about no longer feeding it vibrationally. It's about taking your lens off what drains you and turning it in a new direction. But it starts with awareness, with presence, with recognizing the cycle. As long as you're fighting the mirror, it will keep reflecting exactly what's inside of you. Because the mirror of life can only show what is being observed with intensity, and resistance is, in truth, a form of deep emotional observation. The mistake of believing resistance is strength. The idea that resistance is an act of strength is deeply rooted in our culture. From an early age, we're taught to fight against what bothers us, to face what threatens us, to resist what causes us pain. We grow up believing that being strong means not giving in, fighting back, keeping control at all costs. And in many contexts, that may make sense. But when we talk about consciousness, energy, and inner reality, that logic flips. Because in the vibrational field, resistance isn't strength, it's a prison. Resisting isn't a sign of power. It's a sign of emotional attachment to something you no longer want to live. It's an intense energetic bond with what, in theory, you want to leave behind. But by resisting, you remain present in the same vibration as the problem. And the truth is, you can't free yourself from anything while staying in the frequency that created it. You can't heal scarcity while staying connected to the fear of lack. You can't dissolve fear by staying on high alert against it. What most people call strength is, more often than not, just tension, a constant effort to stay at war with something internal or external. But no war brings peace. No internal battle brings ease. On the contrary, the more you fight, the more exhausted you feel. More drained, more depleted, because without realizing it, you're using your vital energy to sustain resistance. Here's a disconcerting truth. You don't defeat what you resist. You dissolve what you stop observing. That's one of the most powerful keys to real transformation. Because it's not about denying what exists. It's about choosing not to vibrate in its frequency anymore. It's about realizing that true strength isn't in clenching, but in releasing. Not in confronting, but in redirecting. Not in closing your fists, but in opening your hands. Take scarcity, for example. Many people believe resisting scarcity means constantly thinking about how to overcome it. But in practice, that's fixation on the fear of not having. The mind stays busy with strategies, anxiety, comparisons, frustrations. And the vibrational field stays aligned with lack, not abundance. The same applies to fear. The more you resist it, the more it dominates your experience. Because you continue connecting to it, thinking about it, protecting yourself from it. And that sends a clear signal to the universe that it's still alive within you. Resistance also shows up in relationships. When you try to resist a person, a memory, or an emotional wound, you tie yourself to it. And even if you physically walk away, internally you're still stuck. Because what keeps you connected isn't the other person's presence, it's the emotional charge you still carry inside. There is a quiet, subtle, and infinitely more powerful kind of strength than resistance. The strength to release. The strength to choose a new internal state. The strength not to react, but to observe consciously. The strength not to be trapped by what the ego wants to fight. This is the strength of awakened consciousness. The power of energy that doesn't wear itself out in battles, but creates new possibilities by vibrating in a different frequency. When you understand this, everything changes. Because you stop trying to win internal battles and begin, at last, to free yourself from them. Resistance is an illusion of control, a desperate attempt to change the outer world while maintaining the same inner state. But that never works, because reality doesn't change by force, it changes through vibration. How the quantum field responds to the frequency of observation. Have you ever heard that the observer influences the observed? That's one of the most fascinating discoveries in quantum physics, and one of the most spiritually powerful as well. It's not just about atoms and particles, it's about your life, about how your consciousness, your attention, and your vibration shape moment by moment everything you experience. The quantum field is an infinite sea of possibilities, a space where all realities coexist, waiting for a focus of consciousness to collapse into form, time, and matter. This means the universe isn't fixed. It's constantly being created. And the key to that creation is your observation, but not just any observation. What activates manifestation isn't neutral attention. It's attention charged with emotional energy. It's how deeply you feel, vibrate, get involved, and connect with what you're observing. And here lies the most overlooked secret of conscious creation. The quantum field doesn't understand words. It doesn't respond to the phrases you say, or the wishes you write down mechanically. It responds to the vibrational pattern behind your observation. It feels where your emotional focus is, your active energy, your strongest presence. And that is what it brings into your experience. When you observe something with resistance, with anger, fear, frustration, or urgency, even if it's something you want to get rid of, the field interprets that as important to you, that it's alive, that it's charged. And so, like a quantum mirror, it sends more of it back to you. Not because the universe is testing or punishing you, but because it's responding to your frequency. It's simply amplifying what you vibrate most consistently. Resistance in that sense is a strong form of observation. Even if you say you no longer want to live something, if you're still emotionally involved with it, still thinking about it, talking about it, and feeling it, you're observing. And if you're observing with emotion, you're collapsing that reality again and again. Think of it like a radio station. You can say you want to hear a different song, but if your dial is still tuned to the same frequency, nothing changes. You only hear what matches the vibration you're emitting, and your emotional attention is the dial of your reality. That's why so many people affirm what they want, practice visualizations, repeat positive affirmations, and still keep manifesting the opposite. Because behind the beautiful words, there's still a field of emotional resistance. There's still fear, still tension, still a vibrational link to the problem. And the quantum field is responding to that, to the real energy being emitted, not to the surface level speech. The good news is, the field also responds immediately when you shift your focus, even if gradually. When you begin to soften your observation, when you release the emotional charge, when you allow something to no longer be the center of your vibrational attention, reality starts to rearrange. You don't need to force anything. You just need to stop keeping alive the frequency of what you no longer want to live. Observation is a creative act. Through conscious attention and the feeling that comes with it, you activate pathways in the field of infinite possibilities. The more emotionally involved you are with something, the faster it becomes your lived experience. That's why redirecting your focus with clarity and lightness is one of the greatest powers you have. Quieting the inner struggle is the beginning of transformation. There is a quiet point within you where all transformation begins. It doesn't arise from struggle, excessive effort, or the attempt to control everything around you. It begins the moment you choose to stop resisting and start observing with awareness. Quieting the inner struggle is not giving up. In truth, it is the most powerful gesture a person can make when they decide to truly free themselves from a pattern that keeps them trapped. We often believe we need to conquer our fears, control our emotions, silence the mind at any cost. We try to manage our thoughts, suppress our feelings, correct our imperfections. But all of this, even if it seems noble, is just a subtle form of internal war. It's the idea that something within us must be fought, defeated, or silenced by force. And without realizing it, we become our own oppressors, living in constant tension with what we are or feel. But consciousness doesn't expand under pressure. True change doesn't happen through resistance. It blooms in the space of permission. When you stop fighting what you feel and start welcoming your experience with presence, something magical happens. Energy begins to move differently. The heaviness loses its grip. What once felt like a knot begins to unravel, not because it was ripped away, but because it was met with compassion. That's the moment the cycle begins to break, because you stop feeding the vibration of resistance and start cultivating the vibration of acceptance. And there's no more powerful healing than accepting what is, not as passive surrender, but as the starting point for a new frequency. It's only when you silence the inner war that you can hear the wisdom of your being. It's only when you stop opposing that you can, in truth, redirect your energy towards something new. You don't need to fight anymore. You need to stop feeding. That phrase may sound simple, but it holds immense power. Because everything that stays alive in your life has an energy source, your emotional focus. When you stop feeding scarcity with fear, fear with resistance, pain with rejection, you create space, energetic space, vibrational space, creative space, and that space is fertile. That's where transformation begins. Quieting the inner struggle means, in practice, returning to yourself with honesty and gentleness. It's looking at what hurts without identifying with it, looking at what's missing without despair, looking at what's out of place without judgment. When you do that, something within you reorganizes. You begin to experience subtler states of presence. You start to disconnect from the mental noise that perpetuates tension. You begin to choose where to place your attention instead of automatically reacting to what pulls you. It's not about denying emotions or pretending everything's fine. It's about recognizing that fighting them is what keeps them stuck, and that it's possible to move through them consciously, breathing, feeling, letting them pass. Emotional energy only dissolves when you allow it to exist without feeding it with fear or rejection. And that is freedom. The freedom to no longer be ruled by old patterns. The freedom to create from silence instead of reaction. You don't need another technique to control your mind. You need presence, space, stillness. It's in that silence that your true strength emerges, a strength that doesn't shout, doesn't force, doesn't resist. A strength that observes, chooses, and creates. A strength that transforms without fighting, heals without pressure, and vibrates without getting lost in what's fleeting. How to redirect your observation intelligently. One of the most powerful human abilities is the power to choose where to place your attention. That choice, while it may seem simple, is what determines the quality of your reality. And yet, most people live on autopilot, reacting to what happens, fighting what they don't want, reliving inner experiences as if there were no other option. But you do have a choice. Awareness is the tool that allows you to exit that cycle and redirect your observation intelligently. To do that, the first step is to honestly recognize what you've been observing most often. What occupies your mind when you're alone, in silence? What do you feel repeatedly, even when you try to distract yourself? Often, what you've been resisting is exactly what you've been feeding, with thoughts, emotions, and focus. Not because you want to, but because you didn't realize you could choose differently. That is the first movement of liberation. Bringing to light what you've been resisting and recognizing how much of your vital energy it has consumed. What you think you've been fighting to overcome, you've actually been keeping alive. Real change can't happen without that courageous look. Awareness can only redirect what it sees clearly. The second step is the turning point. It's when you consciously choose to interrupt the vibrational pattern, even if it still feels strong. It's an act of energetic sovereignty. You pause, breathe, and affirm inwardly, I no longer give energy to this. That's not repression, it's a decision. You are choosing to stop feeding a frequency that no longer aligns with your intention to evolve. You are saying with presence that you will no longer be a hostage to an unconscious pattern. But what comes after cutting off the energy, that's what truly transforms. The new focus. It's not enough to stop observing what you don't want. You must cultivate a new direction, a new vibration, a new inner choice. Energy doesn't disappear, it needs redirection. And that's where you begin training your mind and heart to observe what you want to see grow. That doesn't mean pretending problems don't exist. It means choosing not to make them the center of your reality. It means shifting your attention toward what you want to strengthen. Peace, expansion, love, abundance, trust. It's a subtle but powerful training, a daily practice of interrupting the old impulse of resistance and repositioning your inner lens toward what uplifts. And it doesn't need to be perfect. It needs to be consistent. The mind will try to pull you back into problem-focused observation. It'll try to reactivate the pattern. But now you're aware. And every time that happens, you can make a small adjustment. Pause, breathe, release, and remember what reality you've chosen to feed. That is spiritual intelligence. It's not denial, it's direction. It's not escape, it's conscious choice. You can even turn this into a daily reconnection exercise. Whenever you notice yourself resisting something, use it as a signal to shift your focus. Observe where your attention is. Gently ask, is this where I want to stay? And if the answer is no, don't fight the thought. Just lead your mind elsewhere. Plant a different energy, visualize another possibility, vibrate something new, even if only for a moment, because the more you practice, the more natural it becomes. And what used to be an unconscious cycle of resistance transforms into a conscious path of creation. Redirecting your observation is like changing the soil where you plant your energy. And when you choose to plant in fertile ground, the harvest changes. Common cases where resistance sustains suffering. Resistance, though it often feels like a natural or even necessary reaction, is one of the greatest forces keeping human suffering alive. This happens because by resisting, you strengthen the energetic bond with what you're trying to push away. Resistance is a form of vibrational attachment. Even when it comes disguised as indignation, self-protection, or a desire for change, it still sustains the very pattern you believe you're trying to eliminate. And this subtle mechanism shows up in many areas of life, almost always unconsciously. One of the most common examples is the battle against negative thoughts. When a person decides they must control their mind at all costs, that they can no longer think anything bad, they end up in a cycle of mental resistance. The more they try to push those thoughts away, the stronger they become. Because now they're being observed with tension, rejection, and fear. In other words, they're being fed energy. The brain interprets that as something important. And since the quantum field responds to the emotional vibration of your attention, you end up amplifying exactly what you wanted to avoid. The same happens in relationships. When someone insists on resisting the presence or memory of a person with whom they had a painful experience, they're unknowingly keeping that connection alive within themselves. They might cut off contact, delete photos, block them on social media. But if there's still emotional charge within, then observation is still happening. And that observation continues to feed the vibrational bond. The conflict stays alive, not because the other person is present, but because the energy of resistance is still active. Another powerful example is scarcity. Many people resist the idea of lack. They constantly affirm that they no longer want financial hardship, that they deserve abundance, that they're doing everything to prosper. But deep down, they're vibrating from the fear of not having. They're at war with scarcity, and that war keeps the frequency of lack high. The universe doesn't respond to the surface level intention of abundance. It responds to the dominant emotion being emitted. And if that emotion is fear, insecurity, or tension, the field will continue to reflect exactly that. There are also those who resist their own emotions. People who've learned that feeling sadness, anger, or insecurity is weakness, and therefore try to suppress those feelings whenever they arise. But repressed emotion doesn't disappear. It accumulates, and the more it's rejected, the more it grows. Because anything you intensely deny lingers in the background, waiting for a crack to emerge. And the more you fight it, the more imprisoned you become within yourself. Resistance is not healing. Resistance is retention. It blocks the natural flow of energy, which can only transform when it's acknowledged, accepted, and transmuted. Every time you observe something with fear, disgust, or anger, you make it more solid in your experience. Even if unintentionally, you're placing your life force at its service. And that translates into prolonged suffering, repeated patterns, lingering emotions that don't go away, no matter how much conscious effort you make. The key is realizing that lightness transforms more deeply than force, that observing with acceptance is far more powerful than resisting with tension, that you no longer have to keep the problem alive by trying to control it. Instead, you can choose to let go. Breathe. Allow the energy to naturally reorganize the moment you stop holding on to it so tightly. We've come to the end of our journey, and perhaps now everything makes more sense. What you resist persists, not because the universe is against you, but because your observation, charged with emotion, continues to feed what you want to push away. Reality responds to your focus, not to your wish. And when that focus is stuck in resistance, the cycle continues. So here's a challenge. Over the next 24 hours, observe everything you're resisting. Thoughts, people, situations. And when you notice the resistance, consciously choose to stop giving it your attention. Redirect. Plant a different energy. Observe something else. You will feel firsthand the power of your vibrational choice. Your freedom begins the moment you choose to stop resisting and start observing with awareness. In that moment, you stop reacting to reality and begin to co-create it from the inside out with lightness, clarity, and presence.